true crime podcast where best friends and next door neighbors, Willow and Lillian, spill the tea on murder, mysteries, and other things that go bump in the night. So get your favorite teacup ready and let's get into it. Welcome to Cruelty Podcast. This is Lillian, and with me is Willow.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Today.
This month theme is just...
It's really rough, you guys.
It's really, really difficult
it's
to
weird,
do.
like, because you'd think we would have anticipated that,
Right.
but we didn't.
I know we say this a lot, like mid of the way towards the end of the month, in several different themes that we've had, but I think this one really has hit us the worst.
This has been the one that's emotionally hurt me the most.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like, triggered, I guess is the word I'd use.
Absolutely.
Because our civil rights cases do get me mad and preachy.
Yeah.
But these just make me think bad memory thoughts, which we don't like.
Same. In this case as well, because there's a lot of victim blaming in the research.
Boy, howdy, I am sick of that shit.
It's like, it really like gets my heart fluttering just thinking about it because...
I just feel sick to my tummy.
Right. I get like a physical reaction to it because I've been victim blamed you know, and a lot of people have not believed me.
Same.
And that constant having to like reassure other people of your intentions when someone else violently, you know, assaulted you. It's like, I shouldn't have to defend myself. And in this case, very specifically, has a lot of that victim blaming bullshit, which I'm going to do my best to not even bring up or iterate at all. But there are some things about it that we're going to talk about. So that is part of one of the trigger warnings for this case. Obviously, if you're here listening, you know it's the case of Colleen Stan, which most people do know about this case. If you don't, like, no worries, we're going to go through it. But this was a case that did hit the media pretty big. And so,
yes,
you know, a lot of people do know that. So if you aren't familiar with the case, the trigger warnings for this case are sexual assault, claustrophobia.
Oh, yes. It's what I struggle with
that's why this one is really, really difficult for me because I get freaked out just talking about it. And even now, like, as she's, you know, an older woman, even now when she talks about her story, you can see she gets really short of breath and she's
panicked.
Yeah, because it's like it's hard to breathe even just thinking about it.
Yeah, when I was small, I was kept in a closet sometimes. And so I get really freaked out by closed-in spaces. Like I can't even have a blanket touching my chin. Or I feel confined and I will flip out. So when we do these things, like this is one that I have to...
Yeah, you might.
If you don't hear me talk for a minute, it's because it's freaking me out.
Yeah, and I really try not to touch too much on it just because of those things. But you might want to bring up some puppies and kitties on your phone.
I got them cued.
Case. Okay.
I have a puppies and kitties folder on my Pinterest. And that's what I look at if it gets rough for me. Because how can you be sad when you look a little ball of fluffiness?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if we're going to go too much into mental illness, but we may touch on it. I did have it queued for like the trigger warnings on this case because people do bring up like Stockholm syndrome and they bring up, you know, Colleen's mental state throughout this. So we'll talk about it. But again, man, this case was really full of victim blaming bullshit, and I really want to squash all of that. I want to squash it. Like I want to open it up and kind of point at it for a second.
I want to punch it in the gooch.
I really do because it's just not fair, and we have to constantly go through this.
I'm just sick of people who've never been through anything like that deciding they know in a sanctimonious way what they would do.
Well, and just because you've never gone through it and you couldn't imagine what you would do in that situation or you couldn't imagine reacting in that sort of way, like, thank fuck you don't know.
Yeah, be grateful.
Yeah. Yeah. Be grateful that you have no idea what you would have done in that situation.
And extend some grace to someone who has.
Yeah.
That's all you got to do. Just have some empathy. It's not hard.
It's really not.
No.
So yeah, I guess we'll just jump right into it now that I'm already heated. for something that we're going to talk about, halfway through this episode. But no, I mean, this case is something that I've revisited a lot throughout, ingesting true crime and thinking about all these cases. This is a case that, a lot of other cases will mirror, and you'll think about this case whenever you hear other ones. So even if you've already heard this before, it might be a good refresher. But Colleen Stan was born December 31st, 1956. So she is a New Year's Eve baby. She grew up in Riverside, California, in Northern California. Her mother was a citrus grower, and so she grew up on an orange orchard. And I just think that that's very precious. She loved to be outside as much as humanly possible. She had 2 sisters. Her parents were divorced and later had kids with other relationships. So their family grew as she got older. But she grew up spending her weeks with her mother and then her weekends with her father. And for the most part, they made it work. She loved her parents, and they were good to her and her siblings, but she really didn't care much for her stepdad. Living with her mother wasn't that much fun because her mother was always working, and her stepdad was he just wasn't the nicest person in the world. He hated children. Like many of the adults that I grew up around, just fucking hated children, and children should be seen and not heard, and ew, gross, don't come near me kind of thing. And so she was like, well, I don't really like him. So eventually she ended up moving in with her dad as a teenager, and then one by one her sisters ended up going over to their dads as well. So that ended up becoming more of her family than anything. Was over at her dad's house. And in her senior year of high school, she fell madly in love with this boy. She dropped out of high school. She got married. And it was just literally the quintessential whirlwind romance. They fell in love. They moved in together. And immediately within a year, they were like, nah. Nah. And they got divorced, and they went back. They kind of just went their separate ways after that. And she moved in with her dad. She kind of recouped and decided, okay, well, now I'm an adult. I've already been divorced. This is great. So let's travel. Let's get out there. She wanted the wind in her hair, and she wanted to experience life. So her and her best friends, Janice and Bobby, got a place together in Eugene, Oregon. And this was the 50s. I mean, not the 50s, sorry, the 70s. And her and her friends were considered free spirits. They were like hippies. They were fun-loving girls of the 70s. They really, really looked the part. I'm going to post some old photos of them together, and it's really cute. But they had a lot of fun. They liked meeting people. They liked going out. They loved the sunshine. And I don't know. It was just like such a time to be alive, I guess, for her.
I know that feeling.
And she basically got to just do whatever she wanted. She got to travel. She got to meet new people. And again, this is the 70s. Just to remind people of what life is like before we get into, because a lot of accusations come from her at this time. The world is a happy place right now. It's very it's got the shine of the 50s, but with like a 70s funky feel.
I mean, to be fair, there was a lot of social upheaval in the 70s.
Yes, but in media.
But stranger danger wasn't much of a thing.
Hitchhiking was because I'm about to talk about hitchhiking.
Yes.
So we have to understand what people think of their average people around them at this time, right? The war is over there. It's not at home right now, right? We're in the 70s. We have the Happy Days, Three's Company, shows like that on. MASH is on. And so even though there's a war going on, it's still wholesome.
We're coming off the summer of love too, the 60s.
Yes, absolutely. And so when I say everyone hitchhiked.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone really did trust their neighbor at this point in time.
Yep.
And hitchhiking wasn't just a mode of transportation for people who didn't have cars. It was a form of like young rebellion as well, because then you weren't like giving into the man and the oil industry by having a car and a driver's license.
Well, and it's important to point out too that during this time, gas prices had skyrocketed for a variety of reasons, including tensions in the Middle East, and therefore your average person was like, and there were lines, like gas stations were running out, right. And so that's another reason hitchhiking came to such prominence, and as a kind of culture too. Yes, it's true.
Because we do have moments like that during war times where the gas prices will spike up really
Well,
high.
It wasn't because of the Vietnam War. There was like issues in the Middle East which raised the gas prices, and there were shortages. Right. And thus that resulted in long lines, high prices, a lot of gouging. So anti-gouging laws came out of this time period, in addition to you just couldn't afford it.
Right.
So people would hitchhike in response to that. Makes sense to me.
And I mean, it was the way of life. Like it was the option.
It was an option, yes.
Yes, absolutely.
And at the time, people were more afraid of hitchhikers than the people that would pick up a hitchhiker.
Yeah.
And clearly research shows it is the other way around. It's hitchhikers that got to be scared.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, absolutely. But yeah, she considered herself pretty much a professional hitchhiker at this point in time because she had done it so much. And she kind of really relied on her vibes. Like she,
Like her intuition.
Of her intuition. Yeah. She even she turned down many rides throughout her hitchhiking experiences based on whether or not she felt comfortable with people. So when I tell you this, next story, it's with the idea that she knew what to look for. You know what I mean? Like, I really want to give her credit there where it's due, because she was very careful. She was a very careful person. And so when she was living in Eugene, Oregon, 400 miles away from home, and one of her best friends had a birthday coming up and she wanted to be there, well, she was going to be there.
Yeah.
It was her first time away from home. And, she just really felt like she needed to be there for her friend on her friend's birthday. And she wanted it to be a surprise. So not many people knew about this, but she was a safety girl. And so she did make sure to tell, all the right people that she was about to hitchhike and where she was going and all of that. She always made sure to keep in contact with everybody. She didn't tell her dad. And I'm thinking that's just to make him not worry. But she did tell her friends, both in Eugene, Oregon, her roommates, and her friends that she was going to go meet up with. So everyone was aware. And again, this is 400 miles that she has to hitchhike. And to Colleen Stan, 20 years old in 1977, that ain't no big deal. So
I can't say nothing because I used to hitchhike even though I knew how dangerous it was.
I tried to hitchhike once, and my britches were just way too big, and I got one talking to by an ex truck driver, and he said, "Girl, if I take you down to this next stop that I'm going and drop you off, X, Y, and Z is going to happen to you. So do you want to make this decision, or do you want me to take you home?" And I was like, "Please take me home."
Oh no, I hitchhiked everywhere.
I was 20 years old and
I was 19.
Wanted to go to a concert. That was my thing. So
I was 19.
Yeah. So yeah, it's 1977. It's May. It's spring. It's warm. It's bright. It's a wonderful day. And she made almost 300 miles by noon. So that was a very successful beginning part of the day. She made it all the way south that she needed to go, and then she was on the on-ramp to go east over the next remaining 100 or so miles left.
Yeah, and this is 1977. The war has been over for 2 years.
You looked it up.
I thought that it ended in 1975 because my dad talked about it a lot because he almost got drafted.
Okay.
And so I just want to say that so you don't get anybody writing in to give you a correction. But the attitudes of the war are going to remain the same long after the war is over.
Right.
And I just want to say that in your favor.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
So yeah, this is about noon, around noontime. And so if she's thinking it well, if it's already it's already afternoon and I've made it 300 miles. I should be able to make it to my friend's house before nightfall. Like this is really, really good for her. And so she's just standing there on the on-ramp. She stood there for about 30 minutes or so. And during that time, she did turn down a handful of rides. She turned down a car full of young guys her age that were like basically like, hey baby, like I could take you anywhere. Like she's like, no
thank you to that.
Yeah,
we're good.
Bye. Yeah, she said no thank you, and then they went on their way. She did turn down a young couple that looked very safe and kind, because they were only going a short distance and she didn't want to bother them. She was like, no worries, I'm gonna wait for a more opportune ride. And that came in the form of a young couple. They stopped and they seemed extremely friendly, just like the last couple. It was a man driving and a woman in the passenger seat. And many sources say that she was actually holding her 8-month-old baby. And this is something that I looked up. I didn't look up the war stuff, but I did have to look up this because I was like, hold on. How is she holding her baby? How is this baby not in a car seat? Like, this is really weird.
Car seats weren't much of a thing back then.
It was a brand new thing, and it wasn't actually like put into law until 1978 through 1985. It took that long just for seatbelt laws to get through each state.
My mama held me when I was a baby. I did not have a car
Weird
seat.
to me.
As she ashed her Marlboro Red into the side door of the car's ashtray.
And I am impatiently waiting for my son to get over the 40-pound limit so I can turn him around.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's 2. And he's still backwards facing. Because that's what the doctor said, and I'm doing, you know what I mean? But it's just interesting how the times have changed.
I remember just rolling around in the back of that station wagon with no seatbelt.
Just interesting. So yeah, apparently she was just holding this 8-month-old baby in the front seat in her arms when they pulled up.
I would think they were safe too.
Right.
I would.
Right. Absolutely. I would too. The couple in the car was Cameron Hooker and Janice Hooker. Cameron Hooker was an absolute just piece of shit. It makes my blood boil just to like say his name out loud.
Oh yeah, he sucks.
I hate him so much. So in the 1988 trial for this case, the judge said that Cameron Hooker was, quote, the worst psychopath I have ever dealt with. If that gives you an idea of this man. Jeez. He was born in Alturas, California in 1953. He was about 3 years older than Colleen. So he's about 23 whenever he picks her up. So that alone is like, this guy is clearly in my age range, like, I believe that Janice was 19. So like, these people are her age.
And they got a baby.
They have a baby.
They're not going to do nothing with that baby.
And whenever you see their faces, like, especially at that time.
Oh, man, they look just like your average couple.
Normal couple that you would see
young
at the
people.
grocery store.
Just nice young people.
Yep. Very plain.
Mm-hmm. 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 Nothing looks creepy or
Nothing
they don't look unkempt.
They don't have that, like, wily look in their eyes that you're like, oh, I should be afeared.
They literally look just like a mild-mannered all-American couple.
Yeah.
For real.
Yeah, it's almost like people that look this quote unquote normal, it's almost like they're like gaslighting you with their existence. Like, I know, because like this whole time it's like it's really hard to see photos, and there's many cases that are like this where it's hard to see the photos of the people and think that they and then actually reconcile
what they did.
Yes,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but yeah, many people throughout his entire life said, "Oh no, that kid is nice. That's a nice kid. Oh, he's so nice. He's so cute. He's so sweet." I really could not find that much specific information on both Cameron Hooker's life growing up and Janice's life growing up. What I did find was pretty shocking. But it took a little bit to mill it over and kind of rationalize it if it is true, because again, I don't have multiple sources to back these things up. It's just really shocking because there was a podcast that I was listening to, and I have it linked and everything, that said that he started his sadomasochist bondage type obsession at the age of 5.
Yeah, it's really weird. Why?
5 to 6. And this is it's I heard it on Hostage from Parcast. So this is a podcast that there's multiple people that have cited for this, and I tried to find their sources to even back this statement up, and I couldn't find it anywhere. But I have seen many sources that said that his family traveled around quite a bit as he was growing up, and that eventually, before he even became an adult, he had quite an extensive collection of bondage magazines and porn magazines and really, really like rough stuff in these magazines. So I'm wondering if maybe 5 is kind of just a really jarring age number, but maybe at a young age he got a hold of some magazines and that started him to spiral out, because we really don't know exactly to pinpoint when this all started, or what even really started it. But it really, all we know is that it started with the BDSM magazines, and he got really, really fixated it. And he kept this secret for a very, very long time. So much that like it wasn't until about 15 or 16 where he even showed like antisocial signs.
And y'all, I want to be clear that back in the 70s, even back in the 90s, BDSM was considered really out there.
Well, and like we talked about Betty Page on the Patreon episode, and I kind of got into a lot of research on the bondage and BDSM magazines of the times, and it was so jarring. And again, most of the people that are actually in the pictures were consenting to it and
absolutely.
Everything like that. And I'm, all for consensual anything. Like, hell yeah, y'all get it. But, a lot of people would see this and take it to an extreme level. And that's where he took it. He didn't want consent. At a young age, at a very young age.
Well, my only point was it's like actually was kind of difficult to find those magazines. Boy, you had to really look, and then special order, and then it was something you would definitely keep secret. It was considered way more taboo than it is today.
Well, this is California, and so if they're moving all around California,
it's a good chance he found
there's
them
a
there.
Very good chance that, because they had like peep shows and stuff like that, and a lot of times the peep shows would have these magazines strewn about, and children would pick them up. I just know this because my husband grew up in Las Vegas, and that's how he found about porn. He just picked it up off the sidewalk.
Yeah, because they're throwing around flyers and shit for the shows.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So there is a chance this could have sparked his fascination at a young age.
Yeah.
Again, it's all speculation. We really don't know. But there had to have been some sort of lead up to what we do know, which is this massive collection and a really intense obsession before he turned 18.
A definite hyper focus.
Yes.
Yeah, but for the most part, people into BDSM are not scary murderers was going to be my
most of them
final
are
point.
my friends, and it's really great. And
Hello.
Hi.
It's me.
Yeah. I'm the problem. It's me. So yeah, just to be very clear here, like this is not yucking anybody's yum.
Oh no.
What we are yucking is the consent part, and that's what he got fixated on. Was he wanted something like that, but he didn't want them to like it. And that's where we draw the
problem.
line.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, by the time he is a legal adult, he is fully antisocial. He does not have any friends. He is completely retracted into his own room and is hoarding these magazines and really hoping and praying for the chance to have his own sex slave, basically.
Ugh.
Yeah, he's really fixated on it.
And
really,
really even then, there existed like consensual, like master and slave type relationships.
1,000%, and that's what that's totally in these fine. Magazines.
Yeah, and that's totally fine. That's cool as shit. But
yeah, it's actually pretty hot, honestly. But
it's super hot.
Not this way.
No,
this makes it disgusting.
Consent is vital, and that's what.
Yeah. And consent is honestly very sexy.
It sure is. Enthusiastic consent means everyone's having a fun time.
Yes, it does.
We enjoy that. Yes.
We like fun.
We like fun, and we like everyone else to have fun.
Yes.
I think that the real switch being flipped was the fantasy idea of someone not enjoying their time.
Exactly. That's where he's at.
Yeah.
That's his main get off. That's his thing.
And that scares me to death. I find that just the idea that somebody's out there and that's what they enjoy is someone else's terror and pain.
That's what they get off is the terror,
Yeah, and the control.
Yeah.
And breaking your will. That kind of shit is what freaks me out. Knowing that people are just wandering around with that living rent free in their head.
And that's the weird thing is there are people walking around among us that know how to mask and know how to
and you'd never
present as normal. Israel Keys is one that really comes to mind.
He really freaks me out.
Terrifying.
I'm glad he's dead.
Oh, is he? I forgot about that.
He killed himself.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, this guy is just awful. And his first job right out of high school was working at a lumber mill. And not only did this, obviously allow him to do the type of carpentry that he will do later, but it also gave him brute strength. Like working at a lumber mill just makes you strong. Like this guy looked really he was somebody called him geeky. And I think that's a good description for the times because he had those big glasses. He had the comb over that kind of bounced his, he was very mousy in nature, but then he worked at the lumber mill and this just
he was ripped,
beefed him up. You know what I mean? And this just made the monster even that much scarier because once they know how strong they are and how weak you are by comparison, it fuels it. So he's working at this lumber mill around the age of 19 when he meets his future wife, Janice, who is 15. 15.
So he's
a child.
It's not a relationship. He's just grooming her.
She was described as mousy and shy. And a lot of people are like, well, yeah, most 15-year-old girls are shy. No, she was particularly shy. She was extremely self-conscious. And it wasn't just by her nature. It was her parents were awful to her. Just absolutely awful.
And that's probably one of the reasons he preyed on her.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. She was exactly what he was shopping for. To a T. Perfect for him to groom. Her mother, first of all, nobody ever in her life ever said I loved you. No one ever said I love you to her. Her mother actually made sure that she knew that she was a disappointment. She would go out of her way to make her feel any type of insecure, any way that she could comment about her body, about how unintelligent she was. There was nothing that she could do right. And so when she met this guy that liked her, she ate this up. She even said that no matter how good or rotten a guy was to her, she just kind of latched onto him. Literally, any attention was good. It was good attention to Janice.
That's so sad.
And it really, really is sad because she is a main part of this story. She is a key member, a key player in the story, but she really was his first victim. And I think that's overlooked quite a bit.
Oh, it definitely is.
So yeah, when this tall, good-looking, older boy started to notice her, she instantly felt like she needed him. And you would think that, her parents, even though they were described as mean and hateful to her, they were extremely strict, quote unquote, God-fearing people. They would never allow her to have a boyfriend prior to this. They would barely allow her to have friends. They'd barely allow her to do anything. But literally just one conversation with him, they were like, oh, okay. That's how manipulative he is.
Yeah, a lot of people, a lot of the podcasts I listen to and any true crime media often fail to talk about how charming and manipulative these abusive people are. And they really are.
It really is. One of my abusers in particular charmed the pants off of anybody. Charm you and make you hate him at the same time, but make you believe every single word that comes out of his mouth.
They're the grifters of the world. If they weren't into abusing people so much, they'd make great salesmen.
Oh, they make fantastic salesmen.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing. They're selling you to them.
Or they're selling themselves to you.
Or that, yeah.
And you just want to buy it.
It's terrifying. It really is.
And they also pick the people, this is their whole life. That's what people don't realize is they're masking just in order to carry out this secret life. Right. And so all their energy is into it.
Right.
So of course they're good at it.
Right.
And then they're on the make to find somebody to victimize. And they're going to pick people who come from bad situations because they're easier to manipulate because they're desperate.
Right.
It's sad.
It really is. It really is. And she had no, it feels like she had no chance in this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was over before it started type of deal.
It really sucks to say that.
Yeah.
It really, really does, because, I mean, it's like her parents groomed her to be submissive without maybe intentionally doing it that way. But
everyone wants a submissive, well-behaved child.
Yeah, and she was the baby of the children, so she was the youngest. So I'm sure they were old and tired of children by then, and I don't know, you know.
Well, that whole be seen and not heard shit.
It was very much.
That's
like
how
that.
we raise victims.
That's how I was raised. So
exactly,
I get it. Be seen, not heard. That's how they get away with it.
Yeah, the older people in my family would always say that shit to me, but I'm an unmanageable goblin, so you gonna hear me.
Right. So yeah, at the beginning he was very charming, like all manipulative abusers are. He, brought her flowers, took her out to the movies, everything like that, brought her gifts, basically until she was wrapped around his finger. When Cameron took Janice on their very first date, he took her out to the woods, took her clothes off, tied her up by her wrists to a tree, and beat her. Whipped her.
That's not a good date. It's fucked up.
She's 15.
She's a baby.
She may have turned 16 by now, I don't know, but it doesn't matter. She's a baby. And she was terrified. But when he cut her down, he was so the opposite. He held her and told her that he loved her. He would then be the very first person to ever love her. And because of her past,
that's all she wanted was
this
love.
Is all she wanted. And so if this is what she had to do
to get it,
wouldn't
you do anything? To feel like you belonged to someone and that somebody loved you?
Right. To finally get that. And also you got to think about like all of the hatred that she was seeing in her family, and then all the love that she was seeing in the media, how romantic everything was.
Yeah.
You watch all the movie stars get their romantic kisses and their happy endings in life, and as soon as somebody says I love you, of course they're going to be like, finally.
Oh, I get my chance at my happy ending in my fairy tale.
Right.
And you always know there's dark parts in the fairy tale, so this is just the price you have to pay.
And he does this cycle of abuse where he literally whips and flogs her, ties her up and hurts her, and then cradles and loves and nurtures her. And it's this repetitive...
It just fucks her head up, man.
Yes. And it's part of the grooming. And it reminds me a lot of... Fred and Rose West did that to their children quite a bit.
Yes, they did.
And it's just a very like textbook type of abuse. So after her first assault, when Cameron let her down and he loved on her, she was his and he was hers. And that kind of just solidified it right there.
Yeah.
It didn't really take long in their relationship for them to lead to marriage. It was kind of like pretty much instantly. Because as soon as they became each other's, Cameron was able to open up to her. And he even told her all about like his longing to have a sex slave and to do this more often and do this to somebody else as well. And so she saw this almost as like her sign to make a deal. Make a deal with the devil. She said, okay, you can get your sex slave, but I want you to hit her and not me. I want you to have sex with me and not her. Therefore, she could have children because that's what she wanted. She wanted children. She wanted a family. And so if this is how she was going to get it,
and this is right where she goes from victim to abuser.
Yes.
Continuing the cycle of abuse.
Yes. But this is also part of her conditioning as well, because he has beat her, quote unquote, into submissive. I hate that phrase, but that's essentially what he thinks he's done, and has, because he's always wanted more than one. I mean, all of these abusers want more than one. They don't just want one. And this would allow her to not get hit while pregnant. And so it wouldn't put her in any type of, harm, but it would also allow her to have a husband, kind of like, what is it? Have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
It's really disgusting to say that, but it was also, I think, kind of her way of self-preservation in a desperate way. I still think,
sure.
I definitely believe that, I mean, she definitely had a huge part in this.
Oh, yeah.
She was there for the abduction. She was part of it all.
She did start as a victim.
But I think that, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. The only reason why she was like that was because
if he had never come along, this is not something she would have done on her own. And I agree with that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But
yeah.
there's still culpability there.
Yeah. Oh, 1,000%. So, yeah, the two were married after this agreement, January 18th, 1975. Janice got pregnant soon after the wedding, and then 8 months later was when they abducted Colleen Stan. 2 years, basically, of planning this.
Jeez.
From that moment on. And yeah, in May of 1977, they found their victim. And when the hookers picked Colleen up, they seemed completely normal, completely safe. They looked like average people. Nothing threw her off. Nothing at all. Until she'd been in the car for a little bit. Everything had been casual, but every now and then she noticed that Cameron kept staring at her through the rearview mirror. And at first she shook it off. At first she was like, no, I must have glanced up at the wrong time.
It's a coincidence.
He's probably looking past me. He's driving. Obviously his wife and child are right next to him.
He's not going to be weird.
He's not. And then she was like, no, he is. He's checking me out. And this is gross. God. So once she noticed this, she again tried to just shrug it off and just play it cool. Because there was no way that guy was that bold to do this in front of his wife. Well, Cameron pulls over at a gas station and Colleen gets out to go to the bathroom. And while she's in the bathroom, she notices a window there and she heard a voice. And some people consider this a premonition. Some people say this is the voice of God or an angel. Some people say that this is just, her higher self speaking to her. Whatever happens, she hears a voice and it says, jump out that window. And, she's probably just writing it off as like, well.
Man, that happened to me once. It said, a voice just out of nowhere said, don't go that way.
Yeah.
And I ended up in a car accident later because I ignored it.
Yeah.
And we did a whole episode on the voice that people hear. Yes, Amaris Monday. And I totally believe that shit happens.
I think it might be a mixture of things. I don't want to get into what I think because I think weird stuff. But, because I don't want to discredit what she thinks. And honestly, I don't really, I think she might think it was God or an angel at the moment, but in this moment, she doesn't know what it is.
No.
She has no idea what this voice is.
Well, we determined it's an unknowable phenomenon that just happens. It's called the third man phenomenon. It's very interesting.
Oh, is that what that is?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, she's basically just writing it off as like intrusive thoughts. Because I have those all the time. Like, hey, see that? Jump out that window. Like,
yeah, me too. I wrote it off as an intrusive thought
throw
as
your
well.
Phone. And so, yeah, she did. She got back in the car and she noticed when she got back in the car, there's this little wooden box sitting next to her. Just looks like a wooden box. It wasn't sitting there before, but she's like, okay, well, this is weird. But honestly, when I saw it, from the angle that she would have seen it at, I would have probably thought it was either like to carry something like glass or something.
Yeah.
Or like a birdhouse would have been my first thought because it was unfinished wood. I don't know. But she really didn't think anything of it because why would she?
Yeah, why would you think anything wild was going to happen with a fucking box?
So they're just driving along and Cameron asks Colleen if she minds. He says that they had been planning on going to visit these caves, and he was like, I just wanted to go see these caves along the way before we picked you up, so would you mind if we just stopped and looked at these caves real quick? It won't take that much time. It's just through the national forest. It's on the way. She's like, okay, I don't want to ruin your day.
Yeah.
I mean, she's an outdoorsy girl. There's all these reasons to write these things off because normal people would go look at shit. I mean, I do it.
Yeah.
So she's like, yeah, I don't want to bother them. So she agrees. And they pull up. There's no cars. It's completely peaceful. There's just trees everywhere. There's a little stream, like a little creek going through. And so she's like, yeah, this is awesome. Like, let's go look at this. So Janice gets out of the car with the baby. They begin walking towards the river. And Colleen's just kind of watching this all happen. And she's realizing that, well, he's not here. Like, Cameron guy, like, where did he go? He's not in the car. She watches the woman and baby walk away. And there's kind of like this moment of silence where nothing happens. And she's just like, huh. And then all of a sudden, there he was with a knife against her throat. She froze. He grabbed her hands, put them behind her back, and put handcuffs on her. And he says, well, are you going to do what I tell you to do? And she just said yes. And then he put a gag over her head. And I'll share a photo. It's like this handmade leather strap. It's basically like a 3-strap headpiece. One goes over the head and a strap goes over each side of the jaw. And it like compresses her face shut. It makes it to where she can't open the hinge of her jaw.
She can't open her mouth.
Yeah. It's basically a gag without being in her mouth. It's like closing her mouth. I don't know. I'd never seen anything like it, and it was clearly handmade. Mm-hmm. But so he puts this gag thing over her head, and then he basically shows her what this whole box thing is. And so if you are claustrophobic, you might want to skip that 15-second button. He takes the wooden box and he opens it up, and there's a hole just big enough for her head. The entire thing is filled with like insulation, like not like house insulation. It was like a type of foam insulation. I think like fabric of some sort. It was like stuffed with shit.
Yeah.
So you couldn't. The only way that she could breathe was through the neck hole around her jaw.
God.
That's the only way that she could breathe. And it completely like silenced everything. So nobody could hear her scream, even if she could scream, and she could barely breathe. It was just extremely claustrophobic. And he made her lay down in the back seat of the car. He unraveled her sleeping bag, covered her with her own sleeping bag, and then him and Janice just took off. She heard Janice get in the car with the baby. Janice didn't do anything.
No.
Colleen was just absolutely shocked by that, to hear his wife and child get in the car. Because at first you're thinking like, okay, this guy is really evil. Man, I wonder why this lady's with him. But then when she doesn't react at all, as if she's in on it.
It's a real bad sign.
Yeah. So when they got back to the hooker's house, Cameron took the box off of her head and then blindfolded her and led her inside. She could sort of see down through the blindfold enough to be able to see the ground, like as she's walking. And she could see that they had to go up a few stairs. They went through the back door, through the kitchen and living room, and then through a door that led down to steps, down to a basement. And this month sucks for basements. Like it makes my stomach fall into my butt. He let her down into the basement and he made her stand on something. She couldn't tell what it was. Most reports say it was a cooler. Either way, she stood on something and he gradually undid her handcuffs while also taking off her clothes. And all like simultaneously, he's putting these leather straps on her wrists and hooking them up to the beam over her head.
God.
So she's still blindfolded.
So scary.
It really is. And he's doing it so meticulously and like methodically, like.
This is how much thought planning has gone into this.
Yes. And it's just terrifying. And she's just completely frozen. Like, what are you going to do? And soon once he has her all strapped up, he takes whatever she's standing on away from her. And she's just suspended. Just completely naked, blindfolded, and terrified, hanging by her wrist in excruciating pain because just that dead weight on your wrists hurts so fucking bad.
Yes, it does.
And then all of a sudden she feels the crack of the whip. And that first crack just kind of reiterates where she's at.
It makes it real.
This is where she's at. She's like, okay, just an hour or two ago, I was on my way to my best friend's birthday to surprise her. I was almost there. I was a 20-year-old hippie. Now I'm here. She just ended up bawling her eyes out, just sobbing. And she couldn't understand why he was doing this to her. She couldn't believe what was happening to her. She had never heard of sadomasochism. She had never really seen this bondage stuff. She really didn't know what any of this was. Like, if this were happening to me, I would be like, okay, I know what's happening next, you know? But she didn't have that background. She had no idea what any of this was.
It was just hurty and
she
scary.
Really didn't know why this was happening. She didn't know that he was getting off on this.
She just thought she's being tortured.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. When she started to, vocalize that she was like, she was crying, she was getting loud, he told her to shut the fuck up and just hang there. And eventually she began to calm down and kind of wear herself out. And she began trying to like see through the bottoms of her blindfold because he had quit whipping her. And it had kind of just stopped. So she's like, okay, what's going on, right? So she's like looking through the bottom of her blindfold and she sees there's like she can see the concrete floor. That's what she remembers most. But she can see off to the side there's like this little table and it's just covered with stacks of magazines and there's one open. And the woman in the magazine is doing exactly what she's doing.
Oh, God.
So, it's like, that's, it's...
Oh, that would freak me out so much.
Yes. Because then you can already, guess what's to come is all those other magazines.
Yeah.
So she sees that. She's like, okay, well, I've never seen that before, but that's exactly what's happening. So she's like, okay, there's that. And then she begins looking over to the other side and she sees Cameron and Janice at her feet having sex. And she's like, wow, never seen that before either. That's fucked up. And it just really grosses her out. And she's like, okay, this like even more solidifies exactly why she's there. And when the couple finished, Cameron took her down off of the hooks. He put the box back on her head and put her body in another wooden box like a coffin, just square, and chained her hands and feet to hooks that were already put into this wooden box. So there's a box on her head. Her hands and feet are chained
it must have been
to
so
the corners.
Hard to breathe.
That was the main thing. I mean, besides her hands and feet going numb because of gravity and all
circulation,
of that, and hurting so bad. The main thing was the ability to breathe. She really didn't think that she was going to make it because she's panicking. So her heart rate is going up. She's hyperventilating. She's processing all of this because he just puts her in this box, hooks her up, and then leaves. And so she's there with silence, with sound deprivation, complete darkness, which is terrifying. In a box, like, no.
I am out on that shit.
Tapping out. And that's when she starts to realize that like, oh, I have to like, she's like trying to perfect her breathing to get it through the neck opening. That's her only source of air.
I would freak out.
It's making me have a physical reaction to just try to like tell this story. So I'm definitely not going to go and, I mean, this is 7 years of her captivity that this box is on and off her head. But yeah, excruciating pain because you also have to think about that breathing, what it's doing to your chest and your lungs and your heart and all of that other shit. So she begins to just start crying and pleading with God to make her survive and help get her out of this alive. She is able to like calm herself down, breathe through that hole in the box, and just calmly try to get through that next morning. And when that next morning came, she was relieved when Cameron came down the stairs and took that box off of her head. But whenever he took that box off her head, he placed her body on a table and restrained her limbs on each corner of that table and then put the box back on her head and then walked away. And this is the form of torture he's going to put her through quite a bit throughout these 7, almost 8 years of capture. just constantly putting her in restraints and this box on her head for hours at a time, coming down, abusing her, strapping her back in. Just, it makes it so short of breath.
Yeah, it's really rough.
So meanwhile, Colleen hasn't made it back to her friend's house in Westwood, where she's planning on going. Her roommates in Eugene haven't heard from her, so everyone starts to get worried. And it's like her travel and spontaneity, like her traveling spontaneously was very normal, but her not checking in was not normal.
Was not normal.
Mm-hmm. And it's not like her to not like check in with family and friends everywhere she goes. So within 4 days, they, without any word from her, her friends in Eugene created missing persons reports. Her family in Riverdale also hadn't heard from her, and they got worried. Her sister ended up telling her dad eventually that she felt something was wrong with her sister. And he was like, oh, why? And then she had to tell him that she hitchhiked. And he was like, oh. Like, he knew that she was a hitchhiker, but she
hadn't told him recently because she didn't want him to worry.
Yeah. Days turned into weeks turned into months, and still no clue, not a single clue about her disappearance. It was literally like she just out of thin air. The one thing that really solidified her disappearance was on Father's Day. Her father did not receive the Father's Day card. And this is something that she did every year. Every fucking year, no matter what. And so that was the thing that made his heart kind of drop for a second.
Yeah.
Now, this case was one of those missing persons cases that the family really had to rally behind, doing all the footwork and doing all the searches, because really the cops weren't really going to get involved very much, because again, there was nothing. There was nothing on the case, but the parents fought tooth and nail. They ended up backtracking all of her movements. They went to each county and put in missing persons reports in each county, each jurisdiction. They even ended up they were driving aimlessly, pondering, I wonder what it was like, or I wonder if she's in there. I wonder if she's in there. And it just so happened they stayed at a hotel a couple blocks away from the house without knowing.
So many of these cases, it really freaks me out.
Mm-hmm. Because they just have no idea. And there really wasn't any sign of her for years. Colleen was held captive in the Hooker household for literally almost 8 years. And in that time, especially at the beginning, she spent most of that time suffocating in that box over her head. Cameron Hooker was her sole provider. So you have to understand that about her, that during those 7 to 8 years, he determined every time she ate, every time she drank, when she was able to use the restroom. Everything about her life was filtered through Cameron. And so we have to understand her relationship is literally, I have to please this man any way possible because that's my survival. Because there's so many arrows thrown at her. And it's not about that. She's literally just doing and saying whatever will make him happy. And if they don't
think he wouldn't have killed her, he would have.
Exactly.
She just needed to stay alive. She made that promise to herself.
Right. Right. And every single thing that she did in captivity, it showed nothing about her character other than her will to survive.
She's strong as fuck. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't care what she did.
Exactly. Or said.
No.
Because those were a lot of things.
Say, I love you. You're the most handsome.
That's what she
love this.
That's
this
what
is
she
amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Can't believe I was missing out all my life. I'm so happy I'm here.
They tried to use love letters against her.
It's so fucked.
She's like, I'm just trying not to get hit.
I'm just trying not to get beaten and murdered.
Yeah. Oh, that got my heart going.
Yeah, because I've had similar shit said to me.
Yeah. So when he wasn't there, she basically had no choice but to just lay there. And she heavily relied on her senses. She noticed the temperature changes throughout the day, from cold in the morning to warm in the afternoon to cold back at evening. And this is how she was able to kind of regulate her emotions so she could gear up what was happening at night, but be peaceful during the day and kind of soak up that warmth. Those were her things that she looked forward to.
It's so pitiful.
Usually in the evening, Cameron would come down and play his favorite game of hanging Colleen up by her wrists and beating her with a whip. He'd make other devices as well. He had a stretching machine. This one gets me. It had a series of chains that were hooked up to a rotating wheel and would stretch her arms and her legs, making her rib cage collapse and making it really, really hard for her to catch a breath. Another way of suffocation. And that just, it's terrifying to me.
That's awful.
She stayed in the basement for the beginning portion of her time in captivity where Cameron ended up treating her more like a thing than an actual human being. One point in time, he had her chained up by the wrists, and Colleen was struggling and crying, and Cameron came up behind her and really grossly whispered in her ear something to the effect of not to scream or else he'd cut her vocal cords out. And she swears that even to this day, she heard God's voice again, the third voice. He said, "Don't do it. Don't scream. He's not lying. He's done this before."
Yeah.
And he had.
Exactly. So any victim blamers can go fuck themselves.
No, from then on, she did not scream, and she refused to, which also kind of gave her power back. I think in certain circumstances, if that's what you can get, that's what you get. And she really fought against him. But which yeah, it's good that she did it because he had tried before. Every now and then, after Cameron was done beating Colleen, she'd ask him how much longer he would be doing this to her. And every single time he would ask her, or every time she would ask him this, he'd always say, "Soon." She'd be like, "When are you going to let me go?" "Soon." "When are you going to stop hitting me?"
He was never gonna.
"Soon." To where she would just stop asking because she knew soon meant
never.
And eventually she quit fighting back. So this is kind of the turning point where she kind of like, I don't want to say give in, but physically
placate him.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you get to a point where you're numb and you give in because fighting only gets you hurt worse and threatens your life. And so, yeah, she had to become numb to survive. After a few months, Cameron had built a cage under the stairs for her. And actually, this is a step up from what she's been in. He just kind of walled up the space underneath the stairs in the basement. And he shoved her in there one day, handed her 2 huge gunny sacks of walnuts, and told her to shell the walnuts. So this was something that she got to look forward to, was her time without the blindfold on.
Without the box.
Without the box. She had one light, and she said as soon as he took the blindfold off of her, that one single light bulb hanging in her tiny little room under the stairs was so bright, she felt blinded for a second.
Wow.
Because she'd been blindfolded for months. And then he gave her gunny sacks full of walnuts to shell. I think by hand. Many sources say that she didn't have any tools. And I know you know what that's like. It's not easy, but this is something that she had to look forward to because this was better than what she had. And that's just so sad. So he actually ended up selling these walnuts like at the farmer's market. This is how he was making money. And he ended up giving her many jobs like this. But yeah, it's kind of another level of eerie of how he had this woman held captive in his house that were doing odd jobs for the farmer's market, which he was making money off of. Awful.
It is awful.
So by January of 1978, about 8 months into her captivity, Cameron comes down to the basement with a piece of paper for her to sign. It's a contract.
Oh, lovely.
It's a slave contract. And what she doesn't know is that along with all these BDSM magazines that Cameron has been mimicking this whole time, this slave contract is from one of those magazines.
Yeah, I figured he's not creative enough.
No, he just typed it out and kind of like reworded it a little bit. But yeah, he was really obsessed with the story of O, which I think that we've talked about some other people that were obsessed with that story. I
don't even know that story.
It was a book in the 50s. It was a film in 1975. It's like a boyfriend brings a girl to a bondage party and it turns into like a really bad situation full of sexual assault and bondage.
I've never seen it.
Stuff. It's basically torture porn.
Yeah.
And he just, I mean, it's just kind of one of those things.
It's one of those exploitation movies that were big in the 70s.
Yeah, that a lot of sadomasochist killers end up blaming their crimes on. And it's like, no.
Stupid.
Yeah, and so in one of those magazines that he found a slave contract that was, you know, kind of backed up his fantasies. And so he was like, okay, I'm going to use this against Colleen. So he told Colleen that there was a secret underground sex trade operation called the Company. And he told her that he was part of this group, and he presented her this contract that was basically under the Company's contract. And it looked real. It looked real as fuck. So the contract stated a lot of things, but it basically said that she wasn't allowed to wear underwear. She had to preserve her body parts, quote unquote, for the master's exclusive use and fulfill every desire that he had. She had to call him sir or master. She had to call his wife ma'am, of course, and she wasn't allowed to look at him in the eyes. She had to keep her gaze down. She wasn't allowed to speak unless spoken to. She had to lose her name, this is very big in those. You get like a letter.
Yep.
A lot of people that's what the story of, she got a letter. Her letter was K, so on the contract it's spelled Kay. K Powers, and he got the name Mike Powers. Which I think is from something else, but I'm blanking on it. I think it was like a Saturday Night Live or something stupid. But basically, he took on the name Mike Powers on the contract, and she had to take on the name K Powers, and she had to basically lose Colleen. And we see that quite a bit in these cases as well. And basically, by signing this contract, Colleen would be giving away every ounce of her freedom if she had any left. And she asked him, she was like, well, what happens if I don't sign it? And he said, well, I will make you wish that you did.
Yeah.
And he told her that he'd sell her to the Company. There's also other men in the Company that would buy her and do worse things to her, which I know we've heard that in other episodes as well. He said that if she tried to run away, the Company was always watching, and that they would find her and nail her hands to a beam and suspend her that way, and then leave her there for as long as they wanted. And, you know, he had already done so much to her in this couple months or I think it was like 8 months that she was there. Like, of course she's going to believe this is real.
Yeah, why wouldn't
Why
she?
would she not? If he's already done this much.
Yeah, I'd believe it.
Yeah. Well, especially this is the 70s.
Yeah.
That sounds like a thing. Mm-hmm. That's real. So he said that the Company knew everything, not just everything that they were doing, but also they knew what Colleen's family was doing, that they had eyes on everybody at every time. He said that any movement, if she tried anything, the Company would take it out on her family members as well. And one time later on, Janice even said, because she was just jealous and wanted to say something mean, she said that if she were to step foot outside this house, that it would be basically her pulling the trigger on herself.
Jesus.
Yeah. Basically, that going outside that door is suicide. Because the Company is always watching, the Company will fucking kill you. And so everything that she does is based through this lens, through this filter of like, the Company is out there and the Company is going to get me. And, you know,
yeah,
this is very real at this moment to her. So Cameron handed her a blank sheet of paper and told her to practice her signature. Because again, she hasn't been doing anything for a long time. Mm-hmm. So until she got her signature right, then he gave her the contract and she signed it. And yeah, this contract is going to be used against her in court.
I can't believe it'd be used against her. It makes me so sick.
I know. It really does make me sick to my stomach. She was given a nightgown to wear. That was a plus. After 9 months of being naked, she was finally given a nightgown. No underwear, though. She was allowed upstairs, now able to move around. She did their house chores. So that was a plus. But now that she was upstairs cooking and cleaning and doing all this stuff, Janice is now able to see her at all times. And she gets very jealous. And so now she's being very mean to her. So not only is she getting it from Cameron, she's getting it from Janice as well. She's basically just up there making her life a living hell. She's making snide remarks. And this whole time she has to stare at the floor and keep sweeping or doing whatever she's doing. And she must have said something. Janice must have said something to Cameron about her jealousy towards her, because very soon after she was allowed upstairs, Colleen found herself being blindfolded and being led upstairs by Cameron Hooker to the couple's bedroom, where she was tied up by all fours on all four parts of the bed. And he had him on one side and Janice on the other. And then all of a sudden, all the trigger warnings, Cameron got on top of her and began to sexually assault her. And Janice was right there. And it's just this really weird power move that I think Cameron's trying to make here, because Janice, this was the deal, right? And he just openly violated that deal.
Yes.
And so from this moment on, all bets are off. And he just assumes that he can sexually assault her literally at will anytime he wants. So up until now, he had kept his promise. But now,
because she complained, he was like, well, you complain, this is what you get.
Mm-hmm. Just power moves after power moves. Really, really putting these women in their place, quote unquote. It's just really disgusting. So, yeah, now that he had openly done this in front of Janice, Janice was furious. When Cameron was done, he locked Colleen back in her cage under the stairs. And from that night on, yeah, it was just any time he wanted. Now that he'd broken that promise, it was on. By April of 1978, a year in captivity, Cameron decided to move his family from the house to a small trailer a few miles outside of town. This way he could do whatever he wanted, and didn't have any neighbors or anybody close by that could hear anything. The only downside to this is that they are now in a very small trailer without a basement. And here's where my heart starts racing, because there's more than one box for this girl in the box. This is whenever he creates the plywood box that's just about the size of a grown adult, not much more than that. And he rigs up a ventilation system using an old fan that basically just stays on 24/7, and that's it. And he stores it underneath the couple's bed.
It's terrible.
It's a water bed.
He's just treating her like an animal.
Worse than an animal.
Yeah.
She is in that cage 23 hours a day.
It's fucked.
And from now on, she has to hear everything that happens to Janice. And now all of that torment that took hours on her isn't happening to her anymore. It's happening to Janice.
It's because she complained. Janice complained, and now he's going to torture her.
Mm-hmm.
It's fucked.
Mm-hmm. While also simultaneously torturing the other girl that's locked underneath the bed. Because when it's hot, it's hot. When it's cold, you know?
Yeah.
And she's naked. All she has is a bedpan. And she has to keep it in that box with her.
Can't imagine. Sounds like hell.
She said that she had to move her legs in a certain way to get it up underneath her butt, and then figure out a way with her legs to move it back down so she didn't spill it. I can't. I'm really having a rough time with this story. Yeah, so she was underneath the couple's waterbed for months on end, years. I think it was 3 years. Just so fucking terrifying. Janice even gave birth on that bed while she was underneath it.
My God.
She was actually allowed out just for a second, just to look at the baby. And she said, "Oh, that's a baby." And then he said, "Yep, right back in there."
God.
Eventually, as time wore on, they got more used to Colleen being there. And eventually, she took care of the children. So eventually, she did get let out. And at one point, she was even allowed to jog around the neighborhood. And by that point, she had been so, quote unquote, brainwashed about this company thing that she did exactly what she was told. If she was told, yes, you can run around the block, that's all she did. She ran around the block and came right back as if she was being watched at all times. She was told basically and she basically did anything for fresh air. And I understand that wholeheartedly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. She ended up getting more and more opportunities to venture outside of the box. She began to form more and more like a family unit with them, which is something that happens in captivity. She ended up being a nanny for the children, which is what a lot of people actually believed she was. And so as she became a public, I don't know, somebody that they saw in the public with the family, it made sense. There was no red flags. Of course, that's the live-in nanny. Look at it. You know, there's pictures of her with the family, and it looks right. At one point, Cameron started to chain her to the toilet instead of the bed, which now allowed her to sit on the toilet, allowed her to use it anytime she needed. But right next to her was a Bible, and this is where she starts really reading the Bible, really reassuring herself that she's going to make it through. And kind of each day, this is the only thing that really helps. And 4 years into her captivity, March of 1981, Cameron told Colleen that she was allowed to call her family and tell them that she was coming for a visit. Just randomly. And he said that the company did all of these checks before allowing this, that the company allowed her a visit, that the company had already bugged the house, that the company already had eyes on the house, had eyes in between, had eyes on them. You know, we're always watching, but we're allowing her to go out and see her family and kind of monitor her behavior so they knew exactly like how much control they had of her.
It was like a test.
Oh, just an absolute terrifying test because he was there, and for all she knew, she had a gun to her head the entire time. If she did one wrong thing, either her family was dead or she was dead.
This is how abusers work.
This was terrifying to her.
Yeah, well, no shit.
Absolutely. Well, people are going to use this and say, well, you were smiling in those photos.
Okay.
Yeah, she was smiling to see your family.
She hadn't seen in years.
It had been 4 years.
Exactly.
And she just showed up. And so obviously they didn't know what to do. Like they were like, well, she was probably in a cult or something. That's really what they thought. And it kind of felt like a cult almost, at least the way that he was portraying it. But all they knew was that like, okay, this guy is kind of weird. This is definitely not her type. This isn't the clothes that she would normally wear. Like these are all like handmade clothes. Like this is
it's all weird. A weird situation.
Yeah. They're just like, she's really skinny. Like she was never really this thin. Like just little things. She's like, can't really put your finger on it because there's no like evidence, you know, on the surface. But they were like, I don't know, her boyfriend's kind of weird. This isn't her type. I don't know. It's weird. But whatever. I'm really happy to see Colleen. And so he introduced himself, and then he left. He left her alone with her family, and she got like the rest of that day and then part of that next morning she got to stay the night with her family, and they just kind of gathered around her. They talked about everything that had happened throughout that time that she'd been missing. They really tried not to harp on her at all, and even her sister was like, no, I gotta know, like trying to be that sister and ask all the questions. And her stepmom even like pulled her aside and was like, no, you can't press her. Like I don't know if she's in the right headspace to answer your questions right now. You just kind of have to accept it for what it is and just love her, you know?
Yeah.
Because they were like, if I scare her with, are you in a cult?
Never see her
then
again.
I'll never see her again.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, yeah, they did the best they could with their time together. When Cameron came back to pick her up that next day, her family took this photo of them together. And it's a photo that would be used against her. And it's of her draped over his arm. He's smiling and she's smiling. But the thing is she's smiling at her family.
And she doesn't want to be killed. I don't know how many more times.
And he feels fucking victorious.
Yeah.
You know? But she has to really reiterate that even to this day. And it's really sad. Because I have those types of photos. I can think of them right now of the photos, you know.
I know them.
It's like, you know, Chris Watts have those family photos where like, oh, you know what's really going on now.
But you didn't then, and nobody looking would have.
So, yeah. Many people blame this photo or use this photo as evidence of Stockholm Syndrome. I don't think she had Stockholm Syndrome whatsoever. I think she fully believed everything about the company, which I would have too in her standpoint, and I don't fucking blame her at all. She basically had to stand up for herself in court over this, and I really feel bad about that. Because everybody was like, "See, that's your boyfriend." She's like, "No,
not at all."
No.
So after that outing, Cameron thought that was like way too much fresh air for her. It made him very uncomfortable, and it was back to the box with Colleen, where she would remain 23 hours a day for the next 3 years under the couple's bed, back to the bedpans and overheating and just the horror for 3 whole years. And by now, she's 27 years old. She's been with the hookers for about 7.5 years. And Janice has started going to church more and more often. And the dynamics begin to switch in the house while Cameron is at work and the children at school. Janice begins secretly taking Colleen out of the box for Bible time. And this begins like this kind of friendship between the two of them. And this is where Janice starts to get that heart. This is where Janice starts to understand what's going on because she is getting older. And by 1984, Colleen is taken out of the box and allowed to sleep on the living room floor. And at this point, she's allowed to get a job working as a housekeeper at a local motel. And at this point, Janice and Colleen are friends. And eventually, Janice just becomes riddled with guilt. And she went up to her pastor because she's going to church. She goes up to her pastor and she's like, okay, figuratively, she basically tells the story of Colleen, but she makes it like a third lover. But the pastor is like, no, dude, that's bad. Like, God would not like that. And so she takes this and she's like, okay. So she goes up to Colleen and she sits her down and she's like, Colleen, the company isn't real. And Colleen's like, what? She's like, the company is not real. He's been lying to you this whole time. There is nobody watching you. She's like, oh. She immediately gets a bus ticket home. The second she knows about the company not being real, she leaves.
Goes home. Mm-hmm.
She leaves. Yeah. That's not Stockholm Syndrome.
No, that's her placating a potential murderer.
Yeah. That's her saving her life.
Yeah, of course.
As soon as Colleen got a hold of her dad, and everything was fine, she got to the bus station. She does one last phone call to Cameron at work. And she basically is like, bye. Bye. Yeah. And so, apparently in her words, she said that he bawled like a baby.
Good.
Yeah. And that was kind of her like last hurrah right there. And when she got home to her dad's house, she told all of them about the abduction, but she left a lot of that stuff out.
Because it was hard.
And did not want to talk about it, and she really wanted to put it behind her. She didn't want to go to the police. Janice begged her not to go to the police. And honestly, she didn't want to talk about it.
No.
And like, I understand getting justice, but I also understand taking a fucking nap.
Yeah. I didn't, after my assault, and it wasn't 8 years long, it was one night, I didn't go to the police because I didn't want to fucking talk about it.
I've only gone to the police once, and it was because somebody made me.
I went to the police once, and you know what happened? Fucking nothing, and then he hurt me again.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's terrifying thinking about it, and I'm sure she was in the exact same spot.
She's terrified. She didn't think anyone would believe her.
Yeah.
And then they didn't.
Yeah. So,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. A few months later, after she left, Colleen was able to get a job. She started cleaning hospitals, and she tried to pick her life back up, get it back to normal. She started going to church, started hanging out with family. She even tried to date a little. But at the hooker house, things were just crumbling. Janice ended up leaving Cameron, taking the children. And one day she called Colleen and vaguely just said, "Some people are going to show up and talk to you. I think you should talk to them." And she's like, okay. Janice had gone to the police. So after all this time of telling her don't go to the police, Janice just broke. It was like, nope, I'm gonna. And Janice talks. Janice had not only told them about Colleen and about the abuse on herself, but she told them about another victim, a victim from before Colleen, someone Cameron had murdered. She told police that allegedly in January of 1976, the year prior to Colleen's abduction, 18-year-old Marie Elizabeth Spinache, she went by the name of Marliz. She went missing in Chico, California after she got in an argument with her boyfriend, and everybody suspected the boyfriend. But really, no, he
killed her.
No, yeah. She was just walking home, and a couple pulled up just like Colleen, and he did the exact same thing, only he actually let her off at her apartment, but he was like, nope, psych, pulled her back in the car. So dramatic and so terrifying. Put the box over her head, covered her up, and they actually did it in the middle of daylight. So they had a few hours to kill. So they actually went for like hamburgers with this girl with a box over her head covered up in the back seat of their car. Like went and had hamburgers and like hung out for a few hours, killed some time before taking her home because they had to do it under the cover of night.
Jesus.
Just everything was so nonchalant about that whole thing. But yeah, he ended up doing the exact same thing that he did to Colleen, only she reportedly wasn't quiet, and he tried to cut her vocal cords so she couldn't yell, but tried to keep her alive, but he didn't know what he was doing. And
so he just killed her, yeah.
He ended up strangling her, but it's messy, and Janice ended up helping him discard of the body, and yeah, allegedly, she at least told police that she helped put the body in a volcanic national park, and like right off the side of a road, and they never were able to find the body. So yeah, they weren't ever able to actually fully charge him for the murder of her.
I totally believe her.
But it lined up because whenever they talked to Colleen was like, yeah, like I saw when she was able to clean, she saw where he had kept her things from whenever she was abducted, and next to her things were another woman's things with a picture, like a wallet-size yearbook picture, and she described the wallet-size yearbook picture, and it's exactly to a T the wallet-size yearbook picture that was used for the missing persons ad.
Of Marliz, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So we know that they did that. There just wasn't any proof of it. But in doing that and talking to Colleen about it, they realized that she was very calm about it, and she was like, no, I'll talk. And so with Janice and Colleen against him, they were able to get him on quite a few charges. He ended up getting like 104 years. Sorry, I scrolled way too fast. But yeah, they tried to use the love letter against her, and like they tried to, because she didn't tell anybody about the love letter, so they tried to use that against her, like she's hiding this love letter. They tried to use the photo against her. They tried to use all these things against her, but luckily the jury was able to see through it. He got kidnapping, sexual assault, and using a knife in the process. And they did congruent charges. So he got 104 years. And he was originally eligible for parole in 2023, so this year. They actually had a series of parole mess-ups and a few laws that passed in between then. And right now, Cameron Hooker is actually due for another trial next week. So next Monday, he's actually up for trial to see if he could be let out. Luckily,
no.
Yeah, his attorney got COVID, so it was pushed back until March 27th, so next Monday. And there's actually a lot of petitions going around, so I have one linked to hopefully...
He should never see the light of day again.
Absolutely, because and the thing is that she never wanted to come out like and talk. Like she really wanted to hide and have her peace and all of that. She wasn't public about anything about this until this came about, and she was like, fine. And so she did some documentaries, which I have linked, but it's like, don't.
She shouldn't have to keep explaining herself.
No, exactly. Please believe these people. Like, it's not fair.
She's not getting anything out of it.
No, and it's like, there's only justice if it's murder and this person has like the full evidence kit right there. You know, it's like... It's just frustrating. It's really frustrating. And I feel for her. And that whole case makes me so nervous.
It's really uncomfortable.
It really is. But I'm glad I got it out of the way because it really is like the highlight of captivity and what it's like. It's terrifying.
Yeah.
Terrifying. And I'm so glad that she lived through it, but I don't want her to have to live through it again.
No.
So, yeah.
We believe her.
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
End. Full stop.
You wouldn't believe how many cases I've heard and listen to podcasts, YouTubers, you name it, cover this case, and it's all victim blaming. How could she do that? How could she go for a jog and not run away? Like, what would you do if like the FBI was watching you? Like,
how could you just not shut the fuck up? And look, I'm not going to put other small content creators on blast. Let's just be clear about that.
Anybody, but
I get people asking sometimes, like, what podcast was I talking the shit on? I ain't telling you.
Because I forget. But, it's just something I've seen. And, it's a thing that I've seen with this case is that people just want to point fingers at her when they're not pointing fingers at him.
Eventually, though, I'm going to lose my patience and snap. I'm going to snap.
Girl, snap.
But instead of snapping, I'm going to give some business time.
Yeah, do it.
Not a smooth transition. I do my best. And y'all, if, I had my druthers, I would do no business on the tail end of these cases because
I know.
I don't want to take away from the gravitas of what we just talked about by saying, oh, business. But I have to. The bills must be paid. So... yeah, we have a Patreon. It's really rad. If you want to see the case photos for this and you're not a member of our Patreon, that's okay. It's a public post. Yeah. You can go there and comment on public posts. Mm-hmm. So please feel free. And I will, of course, that's in the link tree. If you want to be a patron, the $5 tier gets you one extra episode per month. Per week. I keep fucking that up every time. My brain, it's a weekly additional episode. I think my brain is like, bitch, you need a vacation. But it's fine. Yeah. No, I don't. I'd never be able to relax anyway. We have a $1 tier called And That's the Tea. We do post-case discussions. Some of those are video. Some of them are not. And they're all very fun. And you get our ad-free regular episodes, but clearly not the bonus episode. We have a $10 pen pal tier. We will send you a little present in the mail and a letter. And they're very cute. And they're very fun. So there's our tiers. I would promote my soap. But I'm sold the fuck out. We have just started new batches. We will be restocked in a few days. So you might want to go to the link tree, go to the soap store and just bookmark it and check back. You can look on my Facebook. You can spy. All my posts are public. And I'll be restocked in like 2 or 3 days. But I sold the fuck out of everything I had. So thank y'all. I appreciate it. Now we can all be clean together. We can smell lovely. It's very nice. But hey, if all you can do to support this podcast is listen, we appreciate you more than words can ever say.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you so much for listening to
this episode just cooked my egg and I'm done now.
I'm physically messed up from that research and that story and having to tell it with words.
Also, if you appreciate our education and talking about this stuff and the emotional labor, because we are both victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. It's
really hard to talk about.
It's super hard to talk about. Feel free to send us a tip on coffee, and we will go get a coffee.
It'd be nice.
And then we can go, fuck, over a cup of coffee.
We never go out.
No, that's for people with money. Yeah. Anyway, we love you guys and appreciate you, and we will see you next time.
Us on your social media platform of choice. Linktree/cruelty has all of the links. Check out our Patreon for exclusive episodes, merch, ad-free episodes, live ghost hunts, and much more. Please be sure to subscribe. New episodes are uploaded weekly. Thank you so much. See you next time. Music and production by Lee.